we have requested Dr. Adil Najam to be our guest speaker, rather special guest speaker for today. Adil's CV is quite comprehensive and quite long. I want complete detail of it, but just to tell that the most recent accomplishment, Pakistan government, they have constituted a Council on Foreign Affairs, and among them one of the most prestigious name is Dr. Adil Najam's name. Adil is a member of this Council on Foreign Affairs constituted by Government of Pakistan. He was awarded Sitara Imtiaz back in 2010, and he was part of the team IPCC 3 and 4, which also won Nobel Prize for their scientific research. And currently he is founding dean of the Pardee School of Global Studies at Boston University. So Adil, over to you, and like all of them, I'm quite keen and looking forward to learn from your ideas.
Thank you, Ji. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. This is always wonderful. Always wonderful to be back at STPI, or coming to Pakistan and not coming to STPI, not speaking here has now become an impossibility for me, and it's always a pleasure to do that. It's part of my remaining in touch with Pakistan. So I'm wonderful to be here. Ji, please agar like. So Majid, I want to I want to present some ideas, some big ideas, and then I hope to have a conversation. Abid, I'll disappoint you. It may not be new, in the sense that nothing in the world is ever new, but it is certainly evolving. And I want to present a few ideas on this notion that I've been working on, and that has a link to this room. And you will see why it has the link to this room in just a minute, for the last 2 years or so. And how this notion, at least for me, of what I'm calling the New World Disorder, has evolved in those 2 years, and the conversation on that has come forward. I won't go into too much of a background. Like, in the one background to put in is that we see sort of these things pockmarked all over the world, right? एक तो वैसी information overdose है, दूसरी information quality has gone down. Third, there's a sense that getting information quickly is more important than getting information right, and that also means that the quicker you get it, the quicker it disappears. Right, and we'll talk about that. Everything comes in a feed. पहले अखबार होता था, what was on the front page remained on the front page. शाम को भी अखबार उठाओ तो it was still front page news. But on a Twitter, Facebook world, that doesn't happen. Right? It just gets pushed by some cat who is dancing or some dog that is jumping. या जो भी किसी को जो कोई चीज़ मिल जाए, कोई अपनी 30 साल पुरानी वीडियो लगा दे. So that sort of thing keeps happening. And in that, what I'm trying to do here is to look at what we are hearing and what comes into our mind and gets all jumbled up. कि आज अफगानिस्तान में ये हो गया, कल ब्रेग्जिट ने ये हो गया, सुबह जर्मनी ने ये कहा, शाम को हम टर्की चले गए. What does it all that mean if you try to put it into a bigger picture, and what does it all mean if you try to see or try to sense the signal within the noise? So I don't know if I get the signal right or not, but what this talk tries to do is to try to at least extract a few signals, things that are so strong that story after story, they seem to have the same resonance and message, and then have a conversation with you on what that means. So what I want to do here, essentially, as I nearly always do, is to set it up by 3 questions. Questions that I may or may not answer, but I hope that help you think about what is the problematic I'm trying to answer. Right? So these are not questions that eventually I get to answer, but they might. First of all is, okay, if I just close my eyes, will what is happening around me go away? कई बार दिल चाहता है कि जोर से आंखें बंद कर लो और खोलोगे तो पता लगेगा ये सब ख्वाब था, सब ठीक हो गया, भला चंगा. And what that really means is this momentary or is this a longer term thing? Second, as you rightly pointed out, this big question, is globalization dead? Is globalization different? Or is what we are seeing actually the success of globalization because it has become such a fundamentally true phenomena that those who thought it could ignore it can now no longer ignore it? Right? Sometimes the best indicator of a concept having gained credence is that people start opposing it. Because when it is a non-serious or an early idea, people can ignore to afford it. And so maybe the Trump rant on globalization is not that globalization is dying, but that the opponents are seeing it as having won by such a magnitude that now you have to defend against it, right? You can no longer ignore it. In fact, in this case, that is my answer. Okay, what we are seeing is not, this is neither a threat to globalization, nor is it a challenge to globalization. It is in fact the maturization of a concept that has moved from the periphery to the relevant to the center. And therefore, you should expect opposition, and that is true for other things. And finally, is this a moment we live in? Is it a blip? Is it the perfect storm? Or is it a new normal? And there can be other things, but all three of those things are very, very important. History has blips. एक moment आता है, कोई बंदा आता है, कोई idea आता है, you know, there's a spark, and it outshines everything else, but then it goes away. Then history has new normals. Something comes up, it is disruptive, but then that disruption becomes the new normal, right? Traffic is a new normal. इसका आप कर कुछ नहीं सकते. आपकी parking is a new normal. अगर SDPI इधर रखना है तो ये तो है, ये तो होगी. And sometimes things are just perfect storms. Right? That means that it is essentially not that something has changed, but a number of things come together at the perfect moment. A Trump, a Brexit, and so on and so forth. And while they may not be blips, they are also not new normal. So it is worth thinking about these things, and we'll talk about it. Now, I had alluded earlier that this has a history in literally this room, and literally this screen. But and I want to come to that. But essentially what I want to do is to tell you a story that's about three things. About the global moment we are in, try to understand ye hai kya, what is happening. Second, how was it shaped? And third, how might it shape our future? And the third ka mere paas koi answer nahi hai, that's the conversation I hope the very, very eminent people in this room who know much more than me will help us have. And I'll tell this by essentially using 7 pictures. Pictures to se zyada hongi, lekin categories saath hongi. And really big ideas in really big fonts. इसमें गीदड़ सिंह ये है कि अगर बड़ा सा font हो, people think you know something. ये असली trick जो है ना modern presentation की है. The bigger the font, the more people might think you know something. But that's what. Now I alluded that this has a history in this room, and I want to talk to you about that. So every year at the Pardee school where I am the dean, for the last 4 years, we ask all of our faculty this question: what were the top stories of the previous years? And we have about 40 faculty, 30 of them will answer, and we put it on Twitter वगैरह, and it's always quite popular, and different people say something, and essentially whatever people are working on, they say वही top story थी, because everyone thinks कि मेरी आँखों के सिवा दुनिया में रखा गया, हर एक यही समझता है कि जो मैं पढ़ रहा हूँ ना वही. And then something happened in 2016. 2016 was very, so if you have 30 faculty, how many and you ask what is the one top story, how many answers will you get? नहीं यार 42, because these are academics, वो बात भी नहीं सुनते ना, उनसे एक मांगो तो 3 बताते हैं. So something happened in 2016. 2016 is Trump has won the election, and suddenly, very unusual for academics, everyone is saying the same thing. And between Brexit and Trump, right? So this is a school of international affairs. We have people who do trade. We have people who do foreign intelligence. We have people who do security. We have people who do environment. And everyone is converging to this one thing. And that is when suddenly I thought कि यार कुछ हो रहा है. Right? There was this. So this was my one-liner or one paragraph from that. Right? इस किस्म की ये उससे पिछले सालों की थी. But this is what I had written then. So this was 2016. And I'll take a time, partly because there are some younger people here, and I want to talk about how research kind of happens. It doesn't happen because कोई idea आ जाता है suddenly, but it evolves. And so this was 2016, December में they asked me, I put this up. Then I come to Pakistan, as always happens, Abid calls and says कि जी आप आए हुए हैं तो आओ. I say जी certainly आ जाऊँगा. And he says come and give a talk. And I say, certainly, when do you want me to come? And he says, come on the 2nd, because the 2nd of January is Adil Najam Day at SDPI. So ये असल में 2nd of January 2017 को हुआ था. And I said कि यार वो climate I say talk about always, so let's talk about something else. And I put a talk, in fact I think I have those slides, and these were my slides for that talk, which was on the post-truth society. Right? And some of you were here in this room, and I talked about post-truth society, which was partly triggered by ये जो मैंने अभी लगाई थी this thing from our thing. And we talked about it, only one of today's slides is from that. Right? So I'm giving this evolution. 2 months after that, Newsline asked me to write a cover story, and I wrote something based on that talk and expanded it further. It was called The New World Disorder, and I expanded it to 3 more issues. And then 5 months later, I was asked to give a major lecture in Florida. Florida is Trump land. Uska gada. So darte I went and I expanded the same talk, and that is the genesis of what you are hearing today. I'll give you the next actually step on this is coming in 2 weeks is the new cover of Herald magazine. They asked me to write their lead essay on the next year, and I wrote this essay which is called 7 Global Trends That Might Affect Pakistan. And that is the next evolution of what I'm saying. Usme aur bhi cheezein hain, but so the point I'm making is for younger people here, that I think is how ideas happen. You talk to other smart people, you get feedback, you use it, you evolve, you grow. So what I'm going to present, and I'm sorry for the longish spiel, this by the way was my statement from this year for our thing, is where we are with this conversation at this point. So I'm giving you a big spiel, and let's come to the point. Right? I want to make 7 points, and I'll start with our friend. And because आजकल हर चीज़ जो है वो ट्रम्प के नाम से शुरू होनी चाहिए, कम से कम मजाक की हद तक. And the first of my 7 points, and I still think this is, if there is any kernel of true innovation in what I'm talking about, it is this idea that what we are seeing is not Trump. What we are seeing is not Macron, or not what is happening in Brazil, or not even what is happening with load shedding. But what what we are seeing is, I hope ये अभी ठीक आ जाए क्योंकि स्लाइडों के बगैर मेरे पास कुछ नहीं है. लेकिन I'll keep talking about it. Before the light went out, you saw that it is the idea of the politics of anti-politics. And my contention, this is my fundamental contention today, and this I think is also true for Pakistan. I think it is especially true for Pakistan. It was truer for Pakistan before it was true for many other places. Is that there is a demand. This is not certain types of leaders. This is not certain type of institutions. This is you as voters and you also as non-voters who are demanding a politics of anti-politics. And what does that mean? The politics of anti-politics essentially is that there is a fundamental belief that has been generated, including by politicians themselves and probably by politicians more than any other group, that politics is bad. And it starts from the assumption that politician is bad. And therefore politics is essentially a vile act. And अगर आप सोचें ना कि आप अपनी आम ज़बान में कैसे बात करते हैं, not just in Pakistan, around the world. You are looking for a job and you ask it, how is it to work in this place? हाँ जी place ठीक है, but politics बड़ी. Right? When you say that person is a politician, you are not saying it as a compliment. So it has seeped into language, and therefore, and this is across the world, and therefore across the world what we now see is this discourse where the politician is bad, and therefore the act that the politician does is despicable, but we need to tolerate them, and therefore a language of accountability also comes कि उन पे हमने नज़र रखनी है क्योंकि ये असल में fundamentally बंदे गलत हैं. और ठीक बंदा भी इसमें अगर आ जाएगा तो वो कल गलत हो जाएगा अगर हमने उस पर नज़र ना रखी. Right? Now this to me is a very, partly because we have not mostly read Socrates and therefore not mostly read what the idea of the polis was. Right? Polis as the place where ideas and people come together and where the collective good can overwhelm. Right? And the most interesting thing is that the one group that is probably more responsible for this happening than any other group across the world is politicians themselves. And across the world, you see politicians essentially saying, elect me, kyunki I am not really a politician. Right? And I'm waiting partly for this to come back, but this is a very, very important point. You see this not just happening in Pakistan. कि हाँ जी मैं इलेक्शन में तो लड़ा हूँ लेकिन असल में मैं वो नहीं हूँ. I am different, right? And therefore, all of them come across, whether it is the Philippines, whether it is the UK, whether it is the US, whether it is Pakistan, whether it is Narendra Modi, essentially coming कि I am not the same. And therefore elect me. So that to me is this thing called the politics of anti-politics. While we get this, the one interesting thought about anti-politics is the following. Okay, it boggles my mind कि I've tried to look कि ये और किस field में होता है. And I don't find that example. So looking for a politician whose criteria is कि जी ये कम से कम इसने पहले ये तो नहीं किया ना, is like saying कि I need heart surgery. But the heart surgeons I know haven't been doing it very well. So let us go to a mochi. कम से कम कोई दिल का मरीज तो उसके हाथ पहले नहीं बीमार हो. Right? So that was the logic of Donald Trump. Right? कि देखो मैं रिपब्लिकन नहीं हूँ, देखो मैं डेमोक्रेट नहीं हूँ, मोची हूँ. मैनू ले लो. तो अगर मैं तुम्हें जूती नहीं बनाई तो तुम्हारा जूता बना लो. वो उस पर बाद में आते हैं, वो आपने फैसला करना है, नारे बाद में. लेकिन to me this is the conceptual point. And the conceptual point really is that you are seeing this across the world. And again, मैं noise की बात नहीं कर रहा, मैं एक signal की बात कर रहा हूँ. I don't really care कि एक मुल्क में क्या हो रहा है. It is irrelevant, not irrelevant. It is uninteresting. I'm trying to look at what's happening in the world. And here is the more important thing, right? क्योंकि usually I present this in the US, right? Lions Den के अंदर जाके Washington में ये present करता हूँ, तो I have to do the next slide, which is in fact that this is not just Donald Trump. Barack Obama was elected on exactly the same point. उसका तो slogan ही change था. Right? So it's not about policies. It's not about someone saying this policy or that policy. It is about attitude. Right? Who in today's leadership is most opposite to Donald Trump? Trudeau, probably, right? In Canada. In the public image. Trudeau's call to election was exactly the same as Donald Trump. कि मेरा बाप पॉलिटिशियन था लेकिन मैं जो हूँ ना, मैं तो पीले रंग की जुराबें पहनता हूँ. I am different. मैं तो देसी वेडिंग पर जाके जो है भंगड़ा डालता हूँ. But the point I'm making is that this demand and this emphasis is coming not from the leaders but from you, and that is very important. Because these leaders are not people who have co-opted government through dictatorship. They have essentially won on the ground of anti-politics. Sorry to take long there, लेकिन इस तस्वीर के लिए हमें तस्वीर चाहिए थी. The second point that you see when you look at the signal, right? Every international relationship should have at least one photograph of a leader without a shirt. So, but this picture is very telling, right? This picture, if for those who don't know, was the New Year greeting card sent by Putin to other leaders around the world. ये ऐਵੇਂ नहीं हो जाता, ये सोच समझ के काम किया जाता है, right? And that is that the first major trend I would see in the noise is anti-politics, the rise of anti-politics. The second is the rise of strongmen. Right? And strongmen is actually much more prevalent. Strongmen I'm using not as just as a word, but as a political science term. Essentially, it is a type of leader who may not necessarily be a man, can be a woman. In fact, Margaret Thatcher was a strongman. But the idea is a leadership whose understanding of power is that power comes from your ability to use it. So we've had about a 70-year world period where strongmen were out of fashion. Right? A strongman leader is one who says, I'm only as powerful as my ability to use it. It's actually the Chaudhary sort of school of global politics. Unless मैं काम आ रहा नहीं है, right? So it's not going to work. I hope we get that back. But the strongman idea is again a very, very important one. And the strongman idea essentially is that there is a rise in leaders, again elected. This is not like Mugabe or Zuma, Jacob Zuma, right? Who came in as very sort of mild, democratic forces and then over time turned into strongmen. कि जब खुदा ने हुस्न दिया तो फिर वो नज़ाकत आ गई उनमें. It's not that. There is a type of leader who comes in as liberal, and then power kind of corrupts them to turn them into strongmen. These are people, the election in Brazil that just happened, who come in on the argument, elect me because I'm a strongman. Elect me क्योंकि मैं तुम्हारी इज्जत जो है उसको वापस बचा दूंगा. Elect me because I will not be weak. Right? And that is a major shift. I would say a 70-year shift. A 70-year shift in global politics. Not in कि एक आधा हमेशा होता है. एक आधा आ जाता है. लेकिन the scale of what we have. Yeah, any chance here? Should I keep going? Huh? So let me keep going because इसमें तस्वीरें were slightly important, but let me keep going on the point. The importance of this, and I'll wait on the photographs later, is that this is not just Putin, right? So when Putin sits on a horse and sends it as his New Year greeting card, essentially it's saying is, me, what do you want to think about me? When you think about me, you want to think strength. Now in Russia, that is very important. Russia has been a major global power. The biggest problem in the mind of the ordinary Russian is कि हम super power से गिर के किधर आ गए हैं और गोर्बचेव ने हमारे साथ क्या कर दिया है. And therefore an image of strength is a very, very logical next step, right? But it is not just Putin who is trying to project these images of strength. You look around the world and you start seeing this everywhere. ऐसा नहीं है कि कुछ अमेरिका के दो यार हैं कुछ नहीं है. This is again a non-ideological global trend of the rise of strongmen, and my argument again is the demand for strongmen, right? That we as electorates are demanding strongmen, and this happens again and again. And North Korea तो आसान है, लेकिन you start merging them and वो सारों की शक्लें फिर एक तरह की लगने लगती हैं थोड़ी देर के बाद. What is the bottom line on strongmen? Here is the bottom line on strongmen, sir. By my calculation in the paper that I had referred to at that time, and now it is more because तब मैंने Brazil वगैरह को नहीं count किया था. 1/2, look at this number needs to be heard carefully. 1/2 of the world's population. 1/2 of the world's population. 2/3 of the world's economy, and 3/4 of the world military. 1/2 of the world's people, 2/3 of the world's money, 3/4 of the world's weapon are now controlled essentially by leaders who are strongmen, whose idea of power is the application of power. At least one of whom Donald Trump has said कि nuclear weapon रखने का फायदा क्या है अगर आपने कभी use नहीं करना. Right? I don't think he will. But the understanding of power is कि उसका फायदा क्या है अगर मैंने उसको इस्तेमाल नहीं किया. I have argued in my writings that we have what the concentration of strongmen, 1/3, 1/2, 1/3, 3/4, we have not seen, by my calculation, at least since 1914. Not 1940. 1940, I mean, फजूल में ऊपर हो गया था. Asli interesting year was 1914, right before the First World War. And the strongman argument here is that there was a confluence of forces. If you think about 1914, आप में से पता नहीं कितने पैदा थे. I'm assuming कोई भी नहीं था. But those who've read about it, if you think what, but no one really knew कि ये ऊँट किस करवट बैठना, right? So the strongman argument again becomes not कि I'm predicting that. Lekin there are actually people, there have been 2 books that have recently come out that both talk about, कि if ever there was a time when global wars are more likely, not दूर के पंगे इधर यमन में ये कर दिया, इराक में वो कर दिया, सीरिया में पंगा ले लिया, not that, but serious war, then this would be the time. I hope they are wrong. I hope I am wrong. But on the confluence of the evidence by the type of leadership we are electing, that is the strongman argument. I'm sorry I took long. Let me rush through the others. It is not just that the world is full of anti-politics and strongmen. The world is also seeing again and again a new and unprecedented rise of ultra-nationalism. Not just nationalism, but an ultra-nationalism. There's no one more than Modi who is a symbol of that. But it's not just Modi. Right? At one level, many, I would say even in Pakistan we've had a surge of it, but certainly in the US. But in the US and Modi, it is more surprising because a country that has essentially created a self-ethos, right or wrong, on the idea of secularism, on the idea of inclusion, on the idea of Gandhi, for it to take that turn, right? And when the great statue is not one of Gandhi but one of Patel, is in fact historically different. Right? And when I make this argument in the US, it's a different argument than making it in Pakistan because obviously we are biased, but that is the third of the gross signal trends. The fourth one, and of all the pictures I'm going to show, if there is one that makes me more scared than any, it is this. People know who this is? Duterte in Philippines. Right? Essentially, the guy as head of state says, कि ठीक है पुलिस वाले अगर तुम मार मूर देते हो फिक्र ना करो क्योंकि जब मेरे पास आओगे माफ कर दूंगा. Right? And that is essentially a politics of fear. Essentially a politics of fear, and I'll come to the governance part of this, where you rule, essentially you conflate your ability to implement with your ability to make people so afraid that what you want to implement gets done. Right? If my goal is that airport pe everyone stands in line, I can have an incentive, I can have smart policy like Rassi, or I can have someone with a danda. Right? And when your ability for the Rassi goes away, and you say, I'm going to make you so afraid that none of you are going to get out of line, that's a different form of governance. And again, we see that across the world, of fear being used as a governance tool. Right? And in this, Duterte is probably the most glaring example, but you see this again in Trump. You saw it at a milder level again in India when, if you recall, ab to hum bhul hi gaye, wo bhi bhul gaye, there was this policy ki unhone demonetization karke the notes. Right? Now, that was never a very sound economic policy as far as I'm concerned. I know hoti hai, uske thode bahut benefit hote hain, but what was more interesting to me was how it was implemented. And the implementation tool wasn't what it usually is, which is incentive. Black money ko white kar do, hum tumhe thoda sa koi fayda dete. The fair element of the implementation tool was far more than that. A fifth aspect of this world that we are seeing is this idea of protest. Right? Now, protest is not a new idea, and again, I would say if you want to look historically, when suddenly protest became a political tool of an unprecedented nature, the place where you would go back last time would again be 1914. Right? उस ज़माने वो anarchist कहते थे. There's a reason why Marx is coming up in this period. There's a reason why Freud is coming up in this period. There's a reason why even good science is happening in this period. Because there was this urge, and this is a very positive thing also, there is this urge in 1914 because of different technologies, and 1919 now because of different technologies, that suddenly the established institutions no longer hold the monopoly on ideas and governance. And the same type of freedom that now the Facebooks makes you give. Right? कल मैंने, for those of you who follow Twitter, कल I put a video of myself from 30 years ago, और रात से जो है ना मुझे लोग मेरे वेट के बारे में नसीहतें दे रहे हैं, which is fine, I know यार मोटा हूँ, मुझे पता है, मुझे शीशा चाहिए, आपकी नसीहत नहीं चाहिए, मेरी माँ अगर कहे तो ठीक है, लेकिन some guy sitting in बुरेवाला who I don't know, जब वो मुझे मेरी हेल्थ पे एडवाइस देता है, ठीक है, क्यूट लगता है. So, but the point is that there is this outburst of sense that we can comment on everything. Because we now have the ability, and therefore we have the right, and that is what brings out the protest. And in some ways, the most comical of these was the so-called Arab Spring. I remember speaking in the US right after that, and I was aghast. A young guy has in Tunisia, has no job, can't get married. People make fun of him. Police want bribes from him. Loses his school, hits the policewoman, sets himself on fire, dies. And the world calls this the Arab Spring. Right? Some sense of proportion not to be there in understanding. But we see these protests everywhere, from dharnas to the Arab Spring types to, therefore, the rise of protests on the type of things that you wouldn't assume public protests happening. This, for example, again, because I usually give this in the US, is from the Charlottesville in South Carolina, right? Charlotte, Virginia, sorry. And sort of a type of people, Ku Klux Klan supporters and others whose argument would have been hidden. Right? It is not that they wouldn't have said that, but they wouldn't have said that in public. Right? I'll show my politics, the rise of Tehreek-e-Labbaik, and the type of language that it is not a side event. It is the mainstreaming of things that you would either think of and not say, or say in closed doors. That comes out, which, as I say, by the way, scientifically had a good thing. So I'm just trying to rush through this because I don't have answers. I only have these signals, and then I want to have a conversation. And then this issue of Brexit, and this is the only stride I had used in that previous one, jisse ye sab kuch baad mein nikla. This whole thing of Brexit, and many people are wondering ki ye Brexit ke piche hai kya? You know, is it an immigrant issue? Is it a British pride issue? Is it, and most people who write about it seriously are quite convinced that it is, at the end of the day, all of those are reasons that impacted the vote. But at the end of the day, it is a reaction to governance being taken away, of moving out, or people feeling governance is moving out from the local to the supranational. Right? And that governance issue is a very, very important one. And the governance issue, I again think here with Facebook and all these things, which I'll come to in just a minute, is essentially this sense of two things. One is a sense of powerlessness, कि things that I had a say in, कि मेरी सड़क पे, मेरे गांव में कौन सा बोर्ड लगता है, being taken away from me and now being put somewhere else. Right? And this is not just an EU issue, this is a global issue. So the WTO, for example, is going to decide what cheese is cheese and what cheese is not. Why Cadbury is not chocolate? Because it has too much milk. Right? And that is a sense of disempowerment. And the other is essentially again and again this thing coming, and you will recognize here in Islamabad. That, by the way, is Delma in Brazil. And the other is this sense of betrayal, not in the sense that power has been taken away from me, but those who have taken power in my name are not delivering. And that has come most often in the name of anti-corruption, pro-accountability ideas. But if you again scratch them through the surface, again, I'm not making a slogan political argument here. कि जब कोई कहता है कि मुझे accountability चाहिए, जब कोई कहता है I don't like corruption, what are they essentially saying? They're saying, यार ये deal अच्छी नहीं थी. There was a contract. I signed a contract with you, I'll give you the vote, I will give you the power, and somehow I'm going to get something back in return. And now I look at the ledger, and that doesn't compute. Right? So well before Nawaz Sharif might have become the role model for this conversation. Again, politics को थोड़ी देर के लिए side पे डाल, because in all of these countries when politics happens, other things come in. This woman in Brazil was much more at the center of this thing, of having been removed after having followed Lula, very, very popular, very left-wing, truly left-wing. Truly pro-poor, right? Truly remarkable changes in governance. So again, if you link it to Pakistan politics, the best that Shahbaz Saab or Nawaz Saab would say is कि जी हमने सड़कें बना दी या हमने highway बना दी, right? These guys in Brazil could say that at a much bigger level. But this notion that the institutions of governance are failing us, and this is important. इस कमरे में I hope ये बात समझी जा सकती है. It is not कि people are saying कि तुम लोगों की governance गलत है. Right? Daily politics में होते हैं कि यार तुमने governance नहीं की तो हम शफकत साहब को ले आते हैं, वो बेहतर आदमी है, वो ठीक कर देगा. I think the signal we are hearing is that the institutions of governance are not working. और ये वो बात है जो आबिद ने की थी, which resonates with me. So, you know, Abid knows this. Some of those papers were published by SDPI. I worked on trade for a long time. And people like me were the ones who would criticize in this kamre mein aur hain Rashid sahab baithe. He just came in, and others who've written about how WTO and international institutions are not fair, right? So it used to be, you had to kind of be left-leaning to say that global institutions, they're not taking care of us. And then something happened, and suddenly it is the exact opposite people who start attacking those global institutions, and then you don't know where you stand. And this happened most to me with the trade issue with Donald Trump. Right? So, right with trade issue was this Trans-Pacific Partnership, TPP, jisko ye kehte the, with the Asian countries. And myself and my colleagues at BU were writing vehemently why it wasn't a good deal. And we were writing it wasn't a good deal because we thought it didn't do enough for the poor. Or NAFTA jab aaya tha, I was writing not against it, but saying that it's not totally pro-poor. And then someone like Donald Trump comes and says, yeah, it is really a bad deal. It is a bad deal because it is too pro-poor. Right? So they take the argument from the exact opposite side and leaves everyone in confusion. The point I'm making is you can turn governance into a question of corruption. You can turn governance into a question of accountability. But that is the slogan part of what happens here. The real part is the loss of faith in institutions at national and international levels, exacerbated by the technologies that we have where we want instant gratification. Right? कि मैं जब वो Candy Crush खेलता हूँ, and if I do a level, तो उस वक्त मेरी screen जो है वो all blow up हो जाए with color, because I'm not going to wait till tomorrow. Right? And that brings us to this question of truth. Right? I'm just about wrapping up. And there is a reason why I start the truth argument with this image, which is of global warming and how the planetary climate is changing. And that is because I think those of us who work on the environment, and particularly climate change, I think owe an apology to the rest of the world. Because lots of people have failed in the last 30 years. No one has failed as miserably. And no one has failed, I would say, as knowingly. ये इमरान को बात अच्छी लगी कि आप नाराज हो जाएगा. I think than those of us like myself who work on climate change. We constantly thought कि ये दुनिया को climate change समझ नहीं आ रही. And therefore, for 30 years, every time someone would deny it, we would try to explain it better. We would improve our slides. We would put more evidence. We would do another IPCC report. As if this was a scientific problem, and if I somehow explained it better, suddenly everyone will say, हाँ, होना ही ना गाल. And then everyone will come to its senses. And I think we were purposely misleading ourselves because at least for 15 years, the evidence has been clear. It's not a question of evidence. It's not a question of science. It's a question of justice. And it's a question of winners and losers. There are winners and losers, and the winners have no interest in paying the losers. Now, if you realize that, the politics should change. Now, what do I mean by this evidence? Some of you have seen this graph before because I believe this is one of the most powerful graphs ever made on anything, ever, at least for me. This is slightly a few years old, लेकिन इसकी current version भी है, वो भी ऐसे ही है उतना, और भी smart है. What the graph tells you is between 1991 and 2012, 13,950 scientific papers have been published on climate change, on global warming, of which only 24 papers in any way question the idea of climate change being a human-induced problem. I've been working on science by my whole life. I don't know of any other issue on which the scientific evidence is so robust. Even gravity will not get you a consensus of this level. Gravity bhi abhi tak sirf theory hai. And yet somehow there is this sense that we need to constantly find more evidence. We need to constantly debate. And partly to ye America mein kahin zyada hai, Pakistan mein kam hai. Every time it snows in Boston, mera hamsaya aake he has to say, so where is your climate change? मैं तो कहता हूँ आ रही है, चल पड़ी है, फिक्र न करो. It'll come and hit you, don't you worry.
2024 improved the Pakistani.
I'm sure he might. It might. I didn't know that.
He's a professor.
I didn't. But I know there are some very good ones. My former professor is one of the 24, Paul Lindson. Right? He's one of the most respected scientists, and he has a scientific point that maybe this is historical. It's mostly about the unaccounted carbon sink in the oceans. Right? The point I'm making is this idea that every time a journalist, Reena, aapne story karni hai, so every time you have to have one person from this side and one person from this side, otherwise balance nahi, is nonsense. The idea that every idea has two views is nonsense. Some ideas don't have another side. Some ideas are just wrong. You don't have to do it. And again, this is much more evident in the US than in many other parts of the world. But the point I'm making with putting it under truth is that truth is now a negotiable commodity. Right? And climate was an early canary in the coal mine that we didn't see. And what we are seeing now, कि सुबह कोई चीज़ होती है और दोपहर तक उस पे 15 जो है politicians are saying कि नहीं ये नहीं हुई थी. And if you make enough noise, you can actually sow to a total fact. I mean, Donald Trump is the master of this, but now you have masters of this in every country, including our own. Right? The reason I start with climate change is that we in the climate change world should have understood this at least 15 years ago. And what we are seeing now in the noise with everything else is essentially the same phenomena where fact and truth are not subject to evidence, they are subject to negotiation, and they are subject to how many people. And part of I think the problem, and again I'm not उसमें बहुत सारी अच्छी चीजें भी हैं, is this whole idea of how certain technologies have evolved in measuring things. For example, some of you know I'm fairly active on Twitter. मेरा जो बेटा है, I think जिंदगी में दो चार काम मैंने ठीक ही किए हैं. I was too kind in the intro, but the thing that my son admires me most for is that I have 50,000 followers on Twitter, and I keep telling him कि यार I know none of them, and half of them उनको मैं पैसे दूंगा अगर वो मुझे छोड़ देंगे. Right? But this idea कि हर चीज के नीचे एक नंबर लगा देना, right? Is a very, very insidious and powerful idea, because it planted this sense that anything that has 5 is better than anything that has 3. Right? The idea of how Google ranks stories, we know that Google is wrong. We know that Google is wrong. And yet, every one of us will use it because it is, while wrong, generally in the right ballpark. Right? Because how does Google do it? Google says the more people are saying something, the more true it is. If you had done all of human history of knowledge that way, the earth would still be flat. Right? I'm not saying that Google का answer हमेशा गलत होता है, but we all know that it's not the best answer. And that is why we look at it for approximation. As a teacher, I find it now much more disturbing. You know, I say something कि Socrates ने ये कहा, and suddenly the class is checking it on Google. यार Socrates को खुद पढ़ लो, उसकी किताब काफ़ी अरसे से मौजूद है. Right? So the point I'm making is that this notion कि आपने एक story को up or down कर देना, and now by this public referenda, right? And I've actually seen these, some of the greatest minds of the world making an argument, and someone from this audience saying, "Nee, but Google says this, you must be wrong." Right? And it's not on a point of fact; it's on a point of conception. Right? And that leads to this blurring of truth. And in some ways, I do think there is a dumbing down of the intellect as information increases. Right? You have more and more information, and less of analysis. And the point that I said earlier, which I think is not inconsequential, the way we interact with ideas and even news changes when it is not, you know, आपको अगर जब newspaper होता था, you know, I'm a newspaper junkie all across the world. When you got the newspaper in the morning, you first looked at it and you knew what was on page 1. By some process, some people had deemed it to be more important than what was on page 16. And something that got a 6-column headline was of more consequence than something that had a one-column, two-inch story. Right? Now, in how you consume news, it is essentially a stream. And the judgment is based either on these ups and downs. And the time period goes away. Right? एक खबर आई, आपने कहा कि जी हाँ बड़ा बड़ा दुख हुआ, ये earthquake आ गया, oh, how bad. 10 minutes later, it has now gone down, and you see it again and again. Living in the US in a different time zone, I see this here. A bomb blast goes, suddenly my Twitter line is nearly all Pakistanis. Suddenly everyone, bada bura, bada, I condemn, I condemn, I condemn. 4 hours later, we are off to something else. Meera ne kuch statement de di or whatever, right? Because that's the nature of the scroll. And that has made it much easier for people to feel that they are involved. Because I can quickly like, I can unlike, I can condemn without any actual action. Right? There are colleagues who actually work on this thing, on how these technologies are essentially changing our activism and our interaction with ideas. But one is about the speed, and the other is about the noise. So there that goes. And again, I'm sorry for drawing this big picture, but that is what the idea was about. And my final of these points is you note, including in my voice, I'm usually not an angry person, including in my voice here, this rise of anger. Right? That activism has been replaced by anger. And this is not a Pakistani phenomena. So इतना भी हम बुरे नहीं है, ऐसा नहीं है कि सिर्फ हम गालियाँ देते हैं. इसमें खुशी होने की कोई बात नहीं है, सारे गालियाँ देते हैं. If again you're following that thing with Cynthia Richie or whatever, you again realize गोरा काले का कोई फर्क नहीं है इसमें. There is just a level of anger that has replaced, because analysis goes out, because noise goes up, anger replaces activism, and this has serious consequences for democracy and policy, right? Because if you're in a traditional democratic concept, I don't like a policy, therefore my recourse is to start thinking of getting myself involved, getting elected, a different set of people with a different set of policies. And if now that is replaced by anger, then and that tool of simple electoralism becomes less important, right? So anger becomes a language unto itself. Let me end with the final slide and put it as a question. So where does democracy end with this? And I don't have an answer. I don't have an answer. I have a hope. I have a dream. I know where I want to be. But the question really is, in many more better minds, there are two very good books that have just come out on this. People are beginning to question that, are we actually coming to a limit of the traditional notions of electoral democracy as it been? That doesn't mean that democracy is out. That could mean that it will evolve into a much stronger thing. Like, in fact, now this moment is making us realize that the democracy that we have been celebrating is a Socratic democracy who didn't actually believe in vote for everyone. He thought, wise people should amongst themselves connect. And in some ways, that's been the nature all along. And we have been constantly saying, हाँ नहीं ये अच्छा ही नहीं है, अगर सारे जितने ज़्यादा हो उतना अच्छा होगा. And some of this noise is telling us, maybe that's not true. Maybe that's not true. So this question is coming up. It's a very disturbing question, because if not, for Pakistan especially, because for us this has been a long question. And it's been a politically misused and abused question of what has democracy done for me lately, and it has a particular meaning. That's not the question I'm asking. The question I'm asking is, if in this world where Facebook feeds can be manipulated, where ads can change people's actual opinions, people have done this. My colleague this experiment by channeling the things you see on your phone. People can change what you will eat for dinner. Right? In that sort of world, how do we deal with the question of democracy, which still remains, as Churchill said, a terrible form of government except for all the alternatives? But since we do not have an alternative, where does that leave us? I'm sorry to have gone on and on, but as you might have noticed, I enjoyed it greatly. I always do. Let me open up.